MindShift Power Pod.
This is MindShift Power Podcast, the #1 critically acclaimed podcast where we have raw, unfiltered conversations that shape tomorrow. I'm your host, Fatima Bey The MindShifter. And welcome, everyone. Today we have with us Clare Ford. She is out of the UK in England, and she's the founder and CEO of Switched On, where she is also a teen success coach. She is also an author. We have a lot to talk about today. How are you today, Clare?
Hi, Fatima. I am feeling good today. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
And I'm glad to have you on. So I like to dive right into it. So tell the audience today, what brings you to this podcast?
Well, I jumped at the opportunity when you reached out because I love connecting with parents and teens. Obviously, yours is an award-winning platform, and it's an opportunity to share, what I'm seeing with teens here in the UK, but also to give those practical next steps to parents and the teenagers to help them build their skills and confidence even further.
Yes. And I was happy to speak to you because you have so much. So let's just show the audience what I'm talking about. So in looking through your website, you said something that stood out to me very strongly. And it says, quote, "School was never built for human souls. It was built to produce workers, and our teens are paying the price." End quote. That is a powerful truth. So with that being true, what does that actually look like today in the UK when it comes to literacy?
Yes. So I think the thing is that schools are rewarding standardization, right? They're rewarding, you get the grades if you do the right things. But what we're seeing is that
Right.
teens, to be academically successful, they really need that personal development because if they just feel measured, but they're not being supported, that is going to result in avoidance, in shutting down their behavior, and not really getting the results that are needed. And this is being seen actually in literacy. We've noticed that the National Literacy Trust in 2025 said that only 32.7% of teenagers enjoy reading in their free time, which is the lowest in 20 years.
Wow. I did not know that. That's not that surprising. Why do you think? I know that there are many reasons, but what are one or two reasons why you think that is?
I mean, I just think that the whole society has changed, and free time is very different to when you or I might have been teenagers. There wasn't that much to do if you weren't out racing around on your bike or seeing your friends. You were sitting inside, reading, coloring, drawing, watching television. So the whole sort of leisure time has changed. I think also there's the role models. I don't think many young people see their parents even reading. I mean, I know, we might read before we go to sleep, but in the day, how often do you see somebody sitting around reading a magazine, reading a car magazine? How often do boys see dads reading? Right? We're not role modeling to our young people that reading is useful or is pleasurable. So we're reading things, of course, but we're reading them on screens. And so you can't actually tell if somebody is reading or if somebody is playing a game or if somebody is texting or whatever they're doing. So it's all happening on screens. And I think that this has made it a massive impact actually on the pleasure of reading.
Yes. And nowadays we're society has changed. We're technologically in a different space. So we really don't have to read much. We can have AI read everything to us audibly. And for some people with learning disabilities, that is extremely helpful. And for other people, it makes them mentally lazy. and they don't see the importance for reading. But we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about that in a few. So let me ask you this. When we talk about literacy gaps, people hear it as an academic issue, which, you just stated. But what does that actually mean in real life for a teenager, in England in particular, trying to function day to day?
Yeah, so I think the thing that I'm really massively noticing is this lack of vocabulary. English is such an
Mm,
incredibly rich language with nuances, and people just aren't using them. Young people aren't hearing the range of vocabulary, and therefore they're not using the range of vocabulary. And I think what this means is that people can't express themselves as well. They can't express themselves with clarity. They can't find the exact word to say what it is that they mean. And so this can lead to frustration, certainly, and
mm.
lower confidence. Um, I think also it means that perhaps instructions are misunderstood, and writing is perhaps avoided altogether. Which has, particularly dire consequences when it comes to having those skills to use later on in further higher education or employment.
Let's take a deeper dive into what you just said, because I think that is key to understanding why this matters so much. It's not just a matter of you should be more educated so we could be smarter.
Mhm.
It goes deeper than that as far as effects. Let's dive deeper into those effects. A couple of the effects you just mentioned. How does that affect them when it comes to jobs and working in careers?
Yeah, exactly. I think employers have noticed poorer literacy skills in recent years. There was a outlook study by NACE, which says that 72.7% of employers look for written communication skills on a resume. And the UK Employer Skills Survey in 2024 said that the lack of reading and understanding instructions contributed to a 30% of skill shortage vacancies. So
Oh
our
my
young
God.
people
Y'all
are
can't see my face, but my
yeah,
jaws just dropped. Go ahead.
yeah. Young people, are missing the mark. They're not coming out of education with the basic literacy and numeracy skills which are needed in the workplace.
And how do you think that's actually affecting this current generation of young workers?
I think it makes them lack confidence. I think it makes
Mhm.
because I think they're aware of it. They're mindful of it. I think and it leads to poorer emotional literacy skills as well. It means that they're maybe not able to communicate so well. They don't feel as confident in a team situation where they have to put their point across quickly and succinctly. There's all sorts of different things. They maybe wouldn't apply for jobs which perhaps they could do because they're worried that their resume is going to look like AI wrote it and they don't know how to edit it. All sorts of things.
Mhm. You're in the UK, so we're specifically talking about the UK, but everything I hear you saying so far, I think mirrors the US. Um, but I think our numbers, and I didn't bring the US numbers to this conversation because we're talking about UK, but I'm gonna guess based on what I do know that our numbers probably mirror yours, but worse.
Mhm.
Maybe just a little bit worse. Because a lot of what you're saying is true here as well. Because every country doesn't have the same literacy issues, for sure. But yeah, it's such a big issue. Um, Speaking of school systems, so we hear a lot that the education system is failing young people,
Mhm.
which I agree with, but that's kind of a broad statement. Specifically in the UK, where is it breaking down when it comes to preparing teens for real life? We just talked about how they're not prepared, but specifically, where are they not preparing them?
I think that the skills that they're learning at school are outdated. So they're just regurgitating information, most of which they're not going to actually need. This is the problem. We're not actually giving them the skills that they need to be future ready citizens who can contribute in a meaningful way. We're giving them the skills that would have helped, 40, 50 years ago to contribute in a meaningful way. And this is the big gap. They need to have more financial literacy, for example, need to know what to do with their money
Mhm.
when they finally start to earn it. They need to understand about debt, They need to understand about savings and investments because, potentially when they get to retire, there isn't going to be any money in the coffers to support them anyway. So they need to be mindful and made aware of all these kinds of things. They need to learn what are the skills to bring into the workforce which are relevant nowadays, which are actually the soft skills, which aren't really taught in schools at all. So that's things like critical thinking, making sure that they ask better questions, creativity. AI can't replace creativity. It can only replace what the question that you put in, the command that you put in for it to build. So if you're a creative thinker, you can create something better than somebody who's not creative. So we need to think about those creativity skills. We need to think about communication and collaboration skills, team building, leadership skills. All of these things are important, and they are actually, I would suggest, founded on literacy, because words have power. Words have power. Words are what create and manifest your life, right? You have to be able to master your thoughts in order to master your life. So you have to be able to manage the words and think better thoughts, think higher level thoughts, ask better questions in order to master your life. And I think that we're not putting enough emphasis on the soft skills that young people need in order to move forwards in the future with confidence so that they can thrive. It's not just about history and, Shakespeare and all of that. Yes, there's a space for that, of course, to broaden your horizons. But I think emotional literacy, financial literacy, digital literacy, and language are absolutely the key subjects that need to be taught rigorously now.
So when you're talking about literacy, you're not just talking about reading and writing. And I love that you mentioned those other details because they are all different eggs in the same basket. And I think it's important that people understand. So this particular episode, I'm normally talking to teens. Sometimes I'm talking to adults. But in this situation, we're talking to the adults who affect the education system around our teens. And I think we're talking about the UK in particular. But for those of you listening, take the bits and pieces that are true for your society and grab something from it, because this is not just a UK issue, and it really is not just a US issue either. As Claire said earlier, it's a societal issue. And I just wanted to point that out. Now, there's this ties into what you just said, but I want to take a little bit of a deeper dive. There's a lot of focus right now on confidence, resilience, and mindset. I focus on those things too. But if a teen is struggling with basic literacy, are we at risk of building confidence without capability?
Yes, I think that confidence must be built alongside the skills, because otherwise it collapses
Mm-hmm.
under the pressure. So it's about building both, right? You can have the skills, but if you're not confident enough to use them, it doesn't work. You can have all the confidence in the world and talk your way into a good thing, but if you don't have the skills underneath to back it up, and that could even be
Right.
skills on delegation, right? Skills to
Mm-hmm.
use AI, it doesn't have to be particularly literacy skills, but it needs to be the skills to work in teams, to work with people, to know how to get stuff done. And that is all communication, which is language, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So yes, I think they have to go alongside each other in parallel.
So what I'm hearing is from some of what you're saying, there's a difference between teaching information and teaching skill.
Yes, you've hit the nail on the head, because the skill is the application.
Right. And there's a lack of that right now.
There's
We're
a lack of
teaching
that.
information, and let's be politically correct and not address real issues. Information. Did I summarize it?
Why are we teaching, children who are age 7 and 8 about fronted adverbials when they can't even spell their name? It's ridiculous.
Mic drop. You just said it. You just absolutely said it. And why are we passing kids on to the next grade, the next level, and they can't even read or function at the level they're supposed to be at?
This is it. when I work with teenagers, with young adults, some of them find it very, very hard to actually write with a pen, with joined up
Yeah.
writing. Their writing is illegible.
Mm. Yeah, good point, because now everything is typed. Everything is typed. And there are I would say there's certain career paths where writing is still required. Yeah, you're right. A lot of them, they're not taught cursive are they taught cursive? I know here in the US, they're pretty much, for the most part, not taught cursive anymore. And I think there's some school districts changing that. But is that true for the US as well? I mean, for the UK as well?
Well, I personally teach cursive still. It is taught in most schools. I actually think it's the
Okay.
best way for young people for their exams. They all have to write their exams. I think it's the best way for them to write quickly and
Oh.
legibly. That's the point. Yeah. We handwrite exams over here still in the
Oh,
UK.
okay.
The
That's
big
important.
exams at 16. Yeah. Yeah. So it's no good just saying, it doesn't matter. The teacher can read my writing or, yeah, they've got to be able to write them to pass their exams.
Ah.
Now, you may argue, well, you don't need to use writing in the workplace. I would argue that you do. Yes, of course, you're typing emails and letters and things like that, but you're leaving notes on colleagues' desks and things as well. You're writing in cards to say, happy birthday. You're still writing. And I think if you look like your writing is grown up and intelligent, it actually makes a good impression.
So let me ask you this. If nothing changes in how we're approaching this, what do you think the long-term impact will be for this generations of teens right now?
So I think that they're not going to see the impact immediately, but it's actually going to
Right.
be very measurable when they become adults. When they become adults, that's when they're going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be more anxiety, more avoidance of learning. They're not necessarily going to be lifelong learners like maybe some of us are, perhaps going and doing master's degrees when we're in our 50s and things. I think you're going to see less of that. They're going to perhaps avoid
Mm.
admin. So they're going to use the AI tools to perhaps do some of the tasks for them, which I'm all for. But you've got to be able to check what's been done. You've got to be able to check and edit. You can't just take the first draft of anything as verbatim. And actually, I think
Right.
this is then going to give them fewer options. If they're not literate enough to be able to analyze legal documents for contracts, for example, then they're not going to have the same opportunities as somebody who has confidence in those literacy skills. And lastly, but very importantly, is they're not going to necessarily be able to hand those literacy skills down to their children. There's going to be even less role modeling than there is now. Not only are the children of the teenagers now not going to see their parents read, they're maybe not even going to see them write.
And so to me, it sounds like we have a current system. And I mean, currently today in 2026, we have a current education system setting up our youth for failure. With that being said, we've talked about what all the problems are. Well, we didn't talk about all of them. We just talked about some of them. But we've talked about what some of the problems are. Claire, what do you see as some of the solutions to this? What can we do to make a change?
So I think some of the solutions are that we need to consciously within family units decide to put our phones down and actually have a conversation. That has to be one of the
Yes.
first things. We have to actually
Hmm.
come together in small communities and converse and tell stories like we used to do around the campfires as tribes. We need to involve our elders again, our elderly people, and tell stories of their lifetimes. We need to talk and communicate and not just text and send emojis and talk to ChatGPT, right? We need to collaborate and connect and communicate with each other once again so that language becomes important.
Yes. That's very general principle that people need to understand first before they start figuring out different ways to implement that. So since we're talking about different ways to implement that, I mentioned at the beginning that you're the founder and CEO of Switched On. So I want you to tell the audience, what is Switched On and how is it a part of the solution in everything we're talking about?
So Switched On is the academy that I set up during the pandemic because so many young people were coming to me who were switched off, in inverted commas. That meant that they were bored of learning. They couldn't see the point in it. They were doing stuff that was meaningless to them. And they were just switched off learning altogether. So I'm like, right, we need to light the spark, right? We need to light the spark. So I'm going to call this academy Switched On. We're going to switch on our young people back into learning to make it meaningful, to make it relevant, to make it exciting, to make it practical, to get them interested and involved again. And so this is what I do, including the literacy support where it's needed. But it's about building that academic confidence, giving them the study skills that they need, and importantly, that emotional resilience to overcome the ups and downs and the hurdles. So I work in 3 pillars: practical, emotional, and academic. And I think all of those things are needed in order to see that success.
Yes, they absolutely are. And that's one of the reasons why, audience, that's one of the reasons I had Claire on today. A lot of people could talk about education systems and they could talk about teens, but not everybody, every day I run into somebody who can talk about the collaboration between all of those in one person. And she actually has a system that approaches it in a realistic way. So I love that you do that, Claire, and I love that you really have a passion for it. The first time I talked to you, that's one of the reasons I was like, I gotta have her on, because you didn't just say, "Oh, here's some information." You had a passion for it. That means to me more than anybody with a bunch of information. Now, having said all that, what advice do you have for the youth in the world today?
So, to any young people listening, I want you to know this. You are worthy of being seen for who you really are. Not the version of you that gets the grades, not the version of you that's keeping everyone happy, but the real version of you. And your voice matters, your ideas matter, your gifts and your talents are needed, even if you're still figuring out what they are. So I want you to know not to shrink to fit a system that was never built to measure your full potential. Keep being you, because that's what the world needs. And to any parents listening, recognize the person standing in front of you for who they really are, not for who you wish them to be.
Can we say it about 45 more times? Because that last part is so critically important. So often parents, and sometimes, school teachers, administrators, and people in different authority positions are trying to convert our youth into their idea of who they think they should be instead of who God created them to be. Very different. Very different approaches, very different mindset, very different vision. And I think what you just said is extremely powerful and could change the whole world if people actually started doing that. And we could develop a generation of amazing, powerful people if people would just allow them to be themselves. Now, Claire, where can people find you?
So the simplest thing really is to go to my website, which is switchedonglobal.com. And on there, there's all sorts of information. There's a free parent guide. People can find out more about me. There's videos on there. So yeah, the website is the best place. There's links on there as well to my social media platforms, switchedonglobal.com.
And all of that will be on the podcast page in the description. And thank you so much, Claire, for coming on. I want to repeat your quote one more time because I might even put it on my own social media because I think it's so powerful. School was never built for human souls. It was built to produce workers, and our teens are paying the price. I want you all, every single one of you, to sit with that quote because it is 1,000% true. And I want you to think about how deep that goes. Once again, Claire, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. It's been an amazing conversation, Fatima.
And now for a mind-shifting moment. This message is for any adult listening, whether you are in the school system or just the average Mary or Joe. I want you to think about this. What are we producing? This next generation, a good portion of them, cannot properly read and write. And it's not just Claire saying that or noticing that. It is a fact. How does that help their future? We know that literacy is tied to success of any kind when it comes to money or career. So we have a generation that is almost guaranteed to fail when it comes to finance and careers. What are we producing? And if you don't like the answer to what we're producing, good. Now we have your attention. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? What can you do about it? Well, maybe you can take a youth in your neighborhood, in your church, in your family, and begin to read to them. Have them read back to you. Something as small as that, if everybody did their part, would make a change. But some of you, maybe that's all you can do, and that's great. What else can you do to help this next generation, who we now call teens, to become interested in their own futures and interested in literacy? It really is important. You heard Claire's passion. That passion is there for a reason, a good reason. So what are you going to do? You've been listening to MindShift Power Podcast. For complete show notes on this episode and to join our global movement, find us at FatimaBey.com. Until next time, always remember, there's power in shifting your thinking.